November 23, 1914, 12:10 in the afternoon, Hoxha Sound, the eastern entrance to Scapa Flow. The steam trawler Dorothy Gray, 85 tons, built for hauling cod off the Aberdeen grounds, is patrolling the anchorage of the most powerful battle fleet in the world. Her armament consists of whatever her crew can throw. Her top speed is 9 knots. Her crew are fishermen who, 3 months ago, were mending nets in a Scottish harbour. Captain Youngson spots a periscope 1¼ miles off Hoxha Head. A German submarine is inside the Grand Fleet's anchorage. He orders full speed ahead. Dorothy Gray is a trawler. The submarine is U-18, a 464-ton attack boat armed with 4 torpedo tubes, each carrying a weapon designed to sink battleships. The mismatch is absolute. But Youngson does not turn away. He aims his bow at the periscope and charges. The impact lifts Dorothy Gray 3 feet out of the water. The collision bends U-18's periscope at right angles, blinds her, and damages her steering gear and hydroplanes. The trawler's crew throw whatever they can grab at the submarine. Buckets, coal, anything within reach. U-18 dives, but she is now crippled. She strikes the seabed, shoots back to the surface, and is rammed again by the destroyer HMS Gary. She dives once more, hits bottom at 230 feet, ruptures her battery cells, and starts a chlorine fire. Kapitän-Leutnant Heinrich von Henning has no choice. He surfaces under a white flag and orders the seacocks opened. 26 crew are rescued. 1 man drowns. U-18 sinks to the bottom of Scapa Flow. A fishing trawler with no guns has just delivered the first blow against a U-boat by any auxiliary vessel in the First World War. Dorothy Gray's skipper and crew will receive £500 from the Admiralty Prize Court, double the standard bounty. Regular Navy officers called these vessels hopeless. They mocked them as Harry Tate's Navy, after a music hall comedian famous for an act where a motorcar gradually disintegrated around him. He personified bumbling amateurism. The Admiralty's own Anti-Submarine Division later admitted the patrol's weapons were abysmally ineffective. A naval review assessment described the patrol strategy as ineffectively charging to nowhere. How did a fleet of armed yachts, fishing trawlers, and herring drifters, crewed by fishermen with no naval training, become the largest anti-submarine force Britain possessed? The Royal Navy entered the First World War with no plan to fight submarines. Pre-war doctrine viewed the U-boat as a coastal defence weapon, useful for attacking enemy warships near fortified harbours but nothing more. Nobody in the Admiralty expected Germany to use submarines against merchant shipping. The concept of commerce warfare by submarine violated the established prize rules of warfare, which required warships to stop and search merchant vessels, allow crews to abandon ship, and ensure their safety before sinking. A submarine could not comply with these rules without surfacing and making itself vulnerable. Germany itself had only 33 operational U-boats in August 1914, and the Imperial German Navy regarded them as secondary to the High Seas Fleet's dreadnoughts. But the Admiralty had, almost by accident, prepared for a different kind of war. In 1907, Admiral Lord Charles Beresford, Commander-in-Chief of the Home Fleet, visited the fishing ports of the East Coast and recommended using Grimsby trawlers for minesweeping. Trawlers had powerful winches designed to haul heavy gear across the seabed, gear weighing hundreds of pounds dragged for miles against the resistance of water and current. Their crews knew how to handle cables and chains in all weather, in gales that kept warships in harbour. They were cheap, numerous, and their skippers knew British coastal waters with an intimacy that no chart could replicate. By 1909, Admiral Sir John Fisher had obtained a small number of vessels for experimentation in coastal patrol work. 6 trawlers were purchased outright as minesweeping training ships: HMS Seaflower, Seamew, Sparrow, Spider, Rose, and Driver, based at Devonport, Chatham and Portsmouth. The trawler section of the Royal Naval Reserve was formally established in late 1911, with Admiralty approval to mobilise 100 trawlers during a crisis and enrol 1,000 men. A new rank was created for the men who would command them: Skipper R.N.R. By August 1914, 109 skippers were registered. The Royal Naval Motorboat Reserve followed in late 1912. On the 1st of May 1912, the post of Admiral of Patrols was created. Rear Admiral John de Robeck was the first holder, succeeded on the 1st of May 1914 by Commodore George A. Ballard. Ballard redesigned the doctrine from patrolling to coastal defence at the direction of First Sea Lord Prince Louis of Battenberg, The infrastructure for a civilian auxiliary fleet existed before anyone knew what it would fight. On the 29th of July 1914, 5 days before Britain declared war, the inspecting captain of minesweepers received instructions to mobilise the Royal Naval Trawler Reserve. Within the first week of war, 80 trawlers of the Ready Reserve were fitted out. Another 100 followed within 2 weeks. By the 6th of August, trawlers were at sea sweeping the first German minefield, laid by the minelayer SMS Königin Louise, from Orfordness to Southwold. On the 20th of December 1914, new patrol areas were formally established encompassing all coastal waters of the United Kingdom, 21 to 23 areas under the Admiral of Patrols. By approximately August 1915, these forces were formally designated the Auxiliary Patrols. The post of Admiral of Patrols was abolished in 1917, and patrol areas were placed under respective local naval commands. The problem was that nobody had given them weapons to fight submarines, and submarines were about to become the primary threat to British survival. The Auxiliary Patrol grew from approximately 80 vessels in August 1914 to 3,301 ships crewed by 39,000 men by January 1918. It represented the largest single component of Britain's anti-submarine effort, and it was assembled from armed yachts, steam trawlers, herring drifters, motor launches, and converted sailing smacks. Armed yachts served as patrol unit leaders, typically the only vessels in a group equipped with wireless telegraphy. They ranged enormously in size. Small yachts measured 30 to 60 gross register tons. The smallest, Foam, displaced only 33 tons. Medium yachts ranged from 200 to 600 tons. Large yachts exceeded 800 tons, with Valiant measuring 1,855 tons, and Lysistrata reaching 1,942 tons. Speeds were generally 10 to 15 knots. Typical armament comprised 2 12-pounder guns on larger yachts, 2 6-pounders or 2 3-pounders on smaller ones. Some had mixed fits. Josephine carried 2 4-inch guns plus 2 2-pounders. Valiant and Valhalla mounted 4 12-pounders each. Crews ranged from 20 to 50 depending on vessel size. 159 were hired during the war. Drifters were smaller, slower fishing boats designed to deploy and retrieve drift nets for herring. Their net handling experience made them ideal for operating anti-submarine indicator nets. Admiralty-built drifters came in 2 types. Wooden-hulled vessels displaced 175 tons, measured 86 feet long with a beam of 19 feet, made 9 knots, and carried a single 6-pounder gun. Steel-hulled vessels displaced 199 tons, measured 86 feet long with a beam of 18 feet 6 inches, made 9 knots, and carried the same armament. Crews numbered 10 to 15. 100 Canadian-built drifters, designated CD1 through CD100, were ordered in January 1917. Total drifters in service reached 1,815, 323 Admiralty-built, and 1,492 hired. Trawlers formed the backbone of the force. They were robust vessels designed to work heavy trawl gear in all weather conditions, with large, clear working decks ideal for mounting guns and handling sweeping equipment. Typical hired trawlers displaced 200 to 350 gross register tons. 3 standard Admiralty-built classes were ordered from November 1916, with 540 ordered and 468 completed by war's end. The Strath class displaced 215 gross register tons, with a deep load of 429 tons. They measured 123 feet long and made 10.5 knots. The Castle class displaced 276 gross register tons, with a full load of 550 tons. They measured 134 feet and made 10 to 11 knots. The Mersey class displaced 324 gross register tons, with a full load of 665 tons. They measured 138 to 148 feet and made 11 knots. All 3 classes used triple expansion steam engines and carried a single 12-pounder gun with crews of 15 to 18. Approximately 2,471 trawlers served in total, 627 Admiralty built, and the remainder hired or taken from the Fishery Reserve. The Royal Navy also took 580 motor launches from the Electric Launch Company in Bayonne, New Jersey. The contract was signed on the 9th of April 1915 for an initial 50 boats. After the Lusitania sinking, the order expanded by 500 more. Total cost reached approximately $22 million, roughly £8,400 per boat. The first 50 displaced 34 tons and measured 75 feet with a 13-pounder gun. The remainder displaced 37 tons, measured 80 feet, and carried a 3-pounder Hotchkiss gun. All were powered by 2 standard petrol engines producing 440 horsepower, making 19 knots maximum. They carried 2 depth charge racks and a crew of 8. The problem was what to arm them with. The depth charge story illustrates the patrol's equipment crisis. The Type A depth charge, introduced in January 1915, was a float and lanyard device that needed to detonate within 20 feet of a submarine to cause damage. According to Admiralty records, no U-boat was ever damaged or sunk by these weapons, and they were rarely used. The first effective depth charge, the Type D, did not enter service until January 1916. It carried 300 pounds of TNT and amatol in a barrel casing, weighed 430 pounds total, and detonated by hydrostatic pistol at preset depths of 40 or 80 feet. A smaller variant, the Type D Star, followed in April 1916 with a reduced 120-pound charge, designed specifically for slow vessels that could not clear the blast radius of the full-size weapon. This was critical for trawlers and drifters, but production was catastrophically slow. Initially, vessels received only 2 depth charges each. Allocations rose to 4 per vessel in June 1917, then 6 in August 1917, and 30 to 50 on larger escorts by 1918. Monthly production reached only 140 in mid-1917. Only in the war's final 6 months did it rise to an average of 1,745 per month. By war's end, 74,441 depth charges had been issued across the Royal Navy, of which 16,451 were fired, scoring 38 confirmed kills. Early hydrophones were equally inadequate. Non-directional hull-mounted hydrophones required the ship to stop engines before listening, a near-useless capability for hunting submarines. The breakthrough came with the Nashfish hydrophone in mid-1917, a towed device that could determine submarine bearing while the vessel was underway. By December 1917, the Royal Navy had deployed 3,680 non-directional and 1,950 directional hydrophones. However, only 3 sinkings across the entire war came from patrol groups using acoustic detection. For most of the war, the auxiliary patrol fought submarines with guns designed to hit surface targets and with nothing that could reach a submerged enemy. The combat record begins with Dorothy Gray at Scapa Flow, but she delivered a crippling blow rather than a kill. The first U-boat sunk outright by armed trawlers came 7 months later. On the 5th of June 1915, off Peterhead in Scotland, U-14, under Oberleutnant zur See, Max Hammerler approached what appeared to be a fishing trawler. The submarine surfaced and fired warning shots, following the prize rules that required stopping and searching merchant vessels before sinking them. HMT Oceanic II was not a fishing trawler. She was an armed patrol vessel. She returned fire. HMT Hawk joined the engagement. U-14 was hit multiple times and could not submerge. Hawk rammed the submarine at full speed, cutting her open. 6 officers and 21 ratings were pulled from the water. Hamill refused to leave his boat and went down with her. The tactics evolved rapidly. In June and July 1915, the Admiralty tried a Trawler-Submarine Trap. HMT Taranaki towed the British submarine C-24 on a submerged line, invisible beneath the surface. When U-40 approached the apparently helpless trawler on the 23rd of June, C-24 slipped her tow and fired a torpedo. U-40 sank with all hands. On the 20th of July, HMT Princess Louise and C-27 repeated the tactic against U-23 with the same result. Lieutenant Commander Harrington D. Edwards received the Distinguished Service Order for commanding Taranaki. The tactic worked twice but was abandoned after the loss of 2 C-class submarines with all hands in subsequent attempts. The most remarkable single action involved HM-armed smack Inverlyon. She was a 59-ton sailing fishing smack with no engine. None. She moved by sail alone. Her armament consisted of a single 3-pounder gun concealed behind false deck panels. On the 15th of August 1915, she was operating as a Q ship off the east coast. UB-4 approached to within 30 yards, intending to sink what appeared to be a defenceless sailing vessel. Gunner Ernest Martin Jahan RN ordered the white ensign raised. He opened fire at point-blank range. 9 hits. UB-4 sank with all hands. Jahan received the Distinguished Service Cross for destroying a 500-ton submarine from a 59-ton sailing boat. By April 1918, the drifter Coreopsis II demonstrated how far the patrol had come. On the 30th of April off Belfast Lough, UB-85 surfaced unable to submerge due to flooding. Coreopsis II displaced approximately 180 tons and carried a 57mm gun. Her crew numbered 12. UB-85 displaced 519 tons submerged and was armed with an 88mm deck gun plus 4 torpedo tubes. Her crew numbered 36. The drifter forced the surrender of the submarine. Captain Gwenther Kresch ordered his men to abandon ship and open the seacocks. All 34 surviving German sailors were taken prisoner by 12 fishermen. The defining battle came on the 15th of May 1917. The Otranto barrage was an Allied blockade across the Strait of Otranto at the mouth of the Adriatic Sea, 72 kilometres wide. British drifters maintained lines of anti-submarine indicator nets to prevent Austro-Hungarian and German U-boats from reaching the Mediterranean and threatening troop convoys. 3 Austro-Hungarian light cruisers, SMS Novara, Helgoland and Saida, attacked the drifter line at dawn. Captain Miklos Horthy, later Admiral and Regent of Hungary, commanded the raid. 47 drifters were on station. Each was armed with a single 6-pounder gun. The cruisers carried 4.7-inch main batteries, mounted torpedo tubes, and could make 27 knots. 14 drifters were sunk. 4 more were damaged. 72 crewmen were captured. HMD Gowan Lear under skipper Joseph Watt found herself confronted by SMS Helgoland at 100 yards. The cruiser ordered Watt to surrender. He ordered full speed ahead. Watt called on his crew to give 3 cheers and fight to the finish. Gowan Lear's 6-pounder managed 1 round before being disabled by return fire. The drifter took 4 heavy shells. Watt then pulled alongside the sinking drifter Floandi and rescued her crew while still under fire from Helgoland. If you're enjoying this, subscribing takes a second and supports the channel. Joseph Watt received the Victoria Cross. Born on the 25th of June 1887 in Gardenstown, Banffshire, he also received the Italian Al Valor Militare, the French Croix de Guerre, and the Serbian Gold Medal. He died on the 13th of February 1955 in Fraserburgh. His medal group sold at Spink Auction in April 2012 for £204,000. Awards for the Battle of the Otranto Straits alone totalled 1 Victoria Cross, 2 Distinguished Service Orders, 6 Distinguished Service Crosses, 5 Conspicuous Gallantry Medals, 18 Distinguished Service Medals, and 31 mentions in dispatches. The auxiliary patrol existed because the Royal Navy had no alternative. Destroyers made 34 to 36 knots. Trawlers made 10 to 12. A surfaced U-boat could outrun any trawler. Destroyers carried 4-inch guns and torpedo tubes. Trawlers had light guns and until 1916, no effective anti-submarine weapons at all. The Admiralty's Anti-Submarine Division inherited the auxiliary patrol as the bulk of the anti-submarine effort, and acknowledged its hardware and tactics were often abysmally ineffective. A naval review assessment described the patrol strategy as ineffectively charging to nowhere. But destroyers were needed to screen the Grand Fleet at Scapa Flow. The dreadnoughts required constant protection against torpedo attack. In spring 1917, Admiral Jellicoe could assemble only 6 destroyers specifically for submarine hunting in the entire English Channel. He estimated convoy escort alone would require 170 escort vessels for the Atlantic plus 217 more for fleet units. Against this impossible demand, the auxiliary patrol offered 3,301 vessels, outnumbering the entire destroyer fleet roughly 10 to 1. Cost mattered. Requisitioned trawlers were already built. Their crews were already trained as seamen, men who had spent years handling vessels in North Sea gales. They consumed no major shipyard capacity and no scarce warship-grade steel. They did not compete with battleship construction for slipway space or skilled labour. Coverage mattered. Trawlers drew shallow water. They could enter harbours and inlets that destroyers could not reach. Fishermen knew the coastal waters of Britain with an intimacy no Admiralty chart could replicate. They knew where the currents ran, where the shoals shifted, where a submarine might lurk in wait for a convoy. The patrol covered 26 areas around the British Isles, from Shetland to Stornoway, down the east coast through the Channel, around all of Ireland. It covered 11 Mediterranean patrol zones from Gibraltar to the eastern Mediterranean, including the Aegean, Adriatic and Tyrrhenian Sea. The Orkneys area alone held 430 vessels in January 1918. Minesweeping was where the patrol proved genuinely effective and genuinely irreplaceable. The East Coast War Channel, 800 yards wide and 200 nautical miles long, was swept twice daily, 6 trawlers from each port before dawn and again in the evening. Dover patrol trawlers swept 250 miles per day. Some 247,000 sea mines were laid worldwide during the war, with over 190,000 in the North Sea alone. By war's end, the patrol had improved the mine-to-ship ratio from catastrophic to manageable, from 1 vessel lost per mine destroyed early in the war to 85 to 1 by 1918. The Americans entered the war in April 1917 with a destroyer fleet that could be allocated to convoy escort. They did not face the Grand Fleet's screening requirements. Their contribution to anti-submarine warfare came in the form of modern destroyers, not converted fishing boats. Germany's assessment of the auxiliary patrol was implicit in Admiral Holzendorf's decision to launch unrestricted submarine warfare in February 1917. He calculated that existing British countermeasures, including the patrol system, could not prevent enough sinkings to force Britain from the war within 5 months. The patrol was not considered a serious obstacle to the U-boat campaign, but the decision to abandon prize rules, to sink without warning rather than surface and challenge, was itself a response to armed auxiliary vessels. U-boats could no longer safely approach fishing boats on the surface. The conversion of civilian craft into Q ships and armed patrol vessels forced submarines underwater, where their effectiveness was reduced, and their vulnerability to the newly developed depth charge increased. Every hour a U-boat spent submerged was an hour it could not use for hunting. Think back to that morning in Scapa Flow. November 1914. A fishing trawler with no guns, crewed by men whose previous combat experience consisted of bar fights in Aberdeen, charges a German attack submarine inside the anchorage of the Grand Fleet. The sceptics who dismissed them as hopeless were wrong. The regular Navy officers who called them Harry Tate's Navy were wrong. The Admiralty planners who equipped them with weapons later admitted to be abysmally ineffective were wrong about their men, if not their weapons. By January 1918, 3,301 vessels crewed by 39,000 men patrolled British waters. Approximately 49% of Britain's 100,000 fishermen served in Admiralty service at some point during the war. From the Humber ports alone, over 880 vessels and 9,000 men were contributed. Over 1,400 steam trawlers were chartered from a registry of just 1,900. They contributed to the destruction of approximately 10 U-boats. They swept tens of thousands of mines. They maintained the Otranto barrage and the Dover barrage. From the 10th of January 1917, they escorted large cross-channel coal convoys, 45 ships per convoy, approximately 800 ships per month. 120,000 merchant vessels passed through the Dover Straits during the war. 5.6 million troops crossed the Channel without a single loss to enemy action. The concept they proved, that cheap civilian hulls crewed by reservists could form an effective auxiliary fleet, became the foundation for the Royal Naval Patrol Service in the Second World War. The Flower-class corvettes that won the Battle of the Atlantic were the direct conceptual descendants of these armed trawlers. They were built on whale-catcher hulls designed by Smith's Dock Company, the same firm that had built Admiralty trawlers in the First World War. They used commercial triple expansion engines familiar to RNR and RNVR crews. They were constructed in small civilian shipyards not normally engaged in warship construction. 294 were built. The Royal Naval Patrol Service itself traced its origins directly to the Auxiliary Patrol. HMS Europa at Sparrow's Nest in Lowestoft, the same base that had trained fishermen in 1914, became the central depot. It trained and drafted over 70,000 men who crewed 6,000 small craft. The RNPS suffered over 250 vessels lost, and approximately 15,000 personnel killed, more than any other branch of the Royal Navy. By the Second World War, the nickname had been embraced with pride. As one official account recorded, in true RNPS style, they took it on the chin, and the title of Harry Tate's Navy was proudly adopted. As the war went on, it was to become a worthy password for courage. The men who crewed Dorothy Gray, Oceanic II, Hawk, Inverlyon, and Gowan Lear were fishermen. They sailed in vessels designed to catch cod and herring. They fought with whatever weapons the Admiralty could spare and often with no weapons at all. and when a 464-ton German submarine penetrated the Grand Fleet's anchorage, a fishing trawler charged it. 85 tons against 464, no guns against torpedoes, 9 knots against 15. The impact lifted her 3 feet out of the water. Harry Tate's navy, the hopeless patrol, they drew first blood.